My dad had our family's fortune. Now I'm uncovering the wealth he never wanted me to have. As a child, my life was too plain. My father, James Rivers, was a very disciplined man who made it a point to tell us how important it is to work for everything in life. To achieve all goals in life, one needed to work hard, faithfully, and most importantly, rely on themselves. While we weren't rich, neither were we struggling. He had a 9-to-5 job at a law firm and lived in a 2-room house on the outskirts of the town. When I was younger, my mother passed away, so it was only me and my father. It could be understood that we had all the markers of a middle-class family and lived beyond our limits. In high school and college, I worked part-time jobs to pay for my tuition. I did not need to expect any financial assistance from my father, as I knew he was not going to provide me with any. Like the other middle-class families scraping for money, I had come to terms with my reality. His perspective on life already informed me. Instead, he aimed to instill strong morals and values, which I am grateful for to this day. Everything transformed once I found out what his secret was. My story begins with a single phone call. I had just come back from work, extremely tired and ready to throw myself onto the couch, when I was suddenly called by my father's lawyer. I had not heard from my father in a few days, which was not alarming considering he was never too talkative, particularly after I moved out. Mr. Henley, the lawyer, did sound serious, asking me to come to his office the next day to talk about important family matters. Having a father that did not speak much never bothered me, so I didn't think much of it. However, perhaps he got himself in legal trouble or his health is in question, considering how distant he has been. Your father has passed away, Mr. Henley stated in a low, solemn voice. The breath was knocked out of me. Wait, how? I'm afraid your father died a few nights ago due to a heart attack. A neighbor found him. I apologize, Michael. This news was shocking, to say the least. No matter how complicated my relationship with my father was, he will always be my father. My head was still spinning as I tried to process everything. We had not talked in some time, and now I will never have the chance to address that. I didn't know, I said quietly, trying to grasp everything he just blurted out. He was sick, but I had no idea. Mr. Henley sighed. Well, he did not want anyone to know. The words barely escaped his mouth. Your father was a private man. Most people knew him as a man who does not care about anyone, especially you. That is his nature, bottling everything up and never letting anyone close. But the more we spoke, the more I realized there was deeper issues regarding my father's secrets than just his health. Your father left a will, Mr. Henley continued as he moved some documents on his table. He did not have many personal possessions, just the house and some items of value. But there is something more. Something more? I questioned, puzzled. My father always lived on a budget. What else could there possibly be? Mr. Henley cleared his throat, as though deciding how best to continue. Instructions were left behind stating that you are to receive a key that opens a safety deposit box at one of the city banks. He was certain no one else knew of this. The box is now in your name, and you alone are to open it. A safety deposit box? In my name? I was absolutely perplexed. My father had never said anything about a safety deposit box. And why would it be in my name? All of these thoughts gave me anxiety. My father was not somebody who left behind mystery boxes. He has always been straightforward, blunt even. Was he hiding something? The following day, I found myself in front of a big hair-raising bank in the center of the city, the key to my father's safety deposit grasped tightly in my fist. Getting some sleep the night prior was out of the question. My mind was racing with a million different questions. What was in that box? Why didn't my father ever speak of it? Why had he been so mysterious about every single thing leading up to his death? Following a short conversation with the manager, the clerk guided me to a private area in the back of the bank where the safety deposit boxes were stored. The clerk came back with a metal box the size of a briefcase and immediately stepped out, leaving me alone in the room. My heart was thumping out of my chest, and I couldn't take my eyes off the box. Everything my father had hidden away from me for years was in there. There was a reason he intended for me to find it after his death, and it was clear it was very important. With my hands shaking, I inserted the key and opened the box. As soon as I opened the box, I realized I was completely lost. There were old documents that were faded, as well as small notebooks with their covers also worn out. However, once I began to look through the papers, my initial feeling of confusion transformed into pure shock. There were hundreds of bank statements available that dated back several decades. What confuses is that these statements didn't belong to an ordinary saving account. Some mid-balance accounts were offshore and had my head spinning. Millions of dollars were concealed in trusted investments which I barely understood. I anxiously sat there flipping through the pages. The shaking of my hand makes it clear. Some ledgers were filled with my father's familiar handwriting that was filled with real notations. The more of these documents I viewed, the more I uncovered the story. My father possessed a vast amount of wealth, one that he had buried deep in the ground. What I saw was unfathomable. Our lifestyle was publicly doable and comfortable, yet I sat in disbelief. For years I was told by my father that money was simple and should be rationed a certain way, so to speak. Now, millions were signed and ready in ocean accounts free from anyone's suspicious gaze. My mind raced with questions wondering about the money's origin, reasoning behind his disguise, and most importantly, why this was kept from my knowledge. For hours, I sat in that tiny room trying to understand the details in front of me. The notebooks consisted of writings that offered reasonable insight, but were disguised with various codes and abbreviations. The unfamiliar names were jumbled alongside random dates and transactions that spanned over the years. It was almost as if my father's dual identity had turned real life into a complex web of secrets that I had known nothing about. Gradually, as reality sunk in, I could not help but compile the documents that would allow me to showcase the truth of who my father really was. He was no longer a middle-class, working lawyer that struggled to provide for himself and family. He was a man who had everything, a figure with very profitable connections who built an empire behind sealed doors. The truth of the matter is, everything was kept hidden from me. Why? That question followed me like a shadow after I exited the bank. My feet felt heavier with every step I took. I had always believed to have known my father, but now I know what an illusion that was. The truth is, there is so much more that still lies beyond my grasp, and I have no notion of where to even begin to solve this riddle. One thing that I know for certain is this: my father concealed this treasure for some purpose. Now that I have uncovered it, I don't know if I am prepared for the aftermath of acknowledging it. You may never hear the story again if you don't subscribe to our channel, but if you do, congratulations. Stories like these will always be available to fascinating and interesting situations at your own time and comfort. Following the revelation about my father's secret wealth, my life took a dramatic turn. It was shocking to learn my father hoarded millions, and while we made it seem like we didn't have a lot of money, it was perplexing to figure out how he was able to keep such a big secret from everyone in the family and why he chose to live a modest lifestyle even when he did have money. The free time from work was spent analyzing and scanning through the files I had taken from the safety deposit box. The vast field notebooks were filled with scribbled notes and financial records which consisted of account numbers along with dates that were spread over several decades. The more I examined them, the more puzzling it became. What is the origin of the funds? Are they legal? Did my father's funds come from some legal activity? The offshore money suggested that whatever scheme my father was tangled in did not have a good reputation, and that terrified me. Names I either recognized or completely did not recognize at all were present in the notebooks. These names seemed to be related to a number of business deals, but a lot of them were written in a code so complicated that I was not able to crack it. The mystery deepened every time I stumbled upon another SERPTIC entry. One thing I was sure of was that my dad had been involved in something that was way bigger than my imagination. Knowing that the person who had raised me was completely different from whom I'd imagined him to be felt strange when walking into the house. My father's house felt primal when I stepped into it, as the simple decor and faded furniture made me think my father was a deceitful person. He always acted like he was struggling, but for some reason he had been hiding a fortune all along. A few days after my discovery, I went back to my father's house. The entire place felt like it was part of some elaborate grid. I went at every nook and corner of the house to see if there was any hidden information regarding the documents. To my disappointment, there was nothing. No safes, documents, or anything. I felt as though I was schooling in a new house. The sad part was that I felt like my dad never wanted to reveal his secrets to the world, which is extremely annoying. Why? Tired and annoyed as I was, I relaxed on the first blue-cushioned chair I saw in his study, which also happened to be one of the rooms I did not venture in much. He had an already reclining blue leather armchair in the room. He had previously warned me that he is an extremely protective person when it came to work, so he never wanted to share the room with me. However, at this point in time, I wish I had ignored all those warnings. I mean, all the times he put boundaries over things, it was too much. Sifting through his desk drawers, I felt like a detective looking for mysteries, searching for something, anything remarkable out of the ordinary. Many of the drawers were simply filled with paper, bills, receipts, letters, and the like. But in the last drawer, tucked away behind a collection of ancient folders, was an envelope that looked like my birthday gift, sealed and addressed directly to me. I believe one thing: I've mastered the art of making money. Take a look in the safety box and you'll see what I mean. It is a lot, more than I ever imagined having. What is a bit troubling if taken at face value is the sudden prominence of the funds alongside so many other aspects of life. Ending with matters I am certain you will, or at spoonfuls of legal issues you would get cherished for swimming around the sharks. At the end, how did my father run away from all of it for so long? If devoid of legal issues, could he have truly built his ghastly fortune through treasure hunting? It feels absurd thinking about. I kept it all hidden in other pieces of life for rather obvious reasons. Laid out in plain view, the table would become infested with vultures until every morsel is devoured whole. A situation only he could come to comprehend. Michael. In the end, it is a wealth bound up with so many strings, never untied without having to sacrifice oneself. Remove the money from the equation and I sink into traditions. I can be free. So, do you remember every letter of the alphabet and everything in between? I did tell you to be smart. However, if you decide to proceed, be advised that you will be entering a world that is far darker than you have ever imagined. Please know that I kept this from you in an effort to protect you. I hope this doesn't offend you too much. Love, Dad. I sat there in silence, utterly shocked, and holding the letter in my hand. My father's words made so much more sense now. The memories I have of him observing my every move and taking so much of an interest in everything I did made my heart race. The money was surely cursed. He had got himself involved with some dangerous people. The wealth that I unlocked was not just hidden away, but rather concealed in something sinister, something dark, something deeply illegal. When I was struggling to make a decision, my first instinct was to go with the suggestion given to me, which was to walk away. Forget about the money and choose to live a quiet, honest life. After everything I've come to find out, how could I possibly do that? How could I just pretend none of it existed and that my father hadn't been living a lie for all those years? Most prominently, how could I choose to walk away from the great fortune, especially when I don't know who those dangerous people are and what they'd be able to do once they find out I know about everything? I was staring at the letter for what felt like hours, and it just put a lot of weight on my shoulders. With every minute spent staring at this letter, I was listening to my father's voice. My thought process was a part of me wanting to burn the letter and pretending I never found the box or the money. Then there is the other side of me which couldn't let go of the mystery, the wish to comprehend the circumstances my father trapped himself into, and the reason he kept everything from me for so long. The next day, I contacted Rachel, an old friend who worked as a private investigator. We hadn't talked in years, but it was clear she was precise at uncovering sensitive information. I hadn't explained everything to her just yet. I simply said that I sensed something peculiar about my father's finances and needed assistance tracing the source of the funds. Rachel met with me, and when I unveiled the documents saved within the safety box, her brows furrowed. "That's a lot of cash," she stated while examining the pages. "In these offshore accounts, whoever set it up was competent. I'm sure I can figure out where those accounts lead to," I asked with a slight sense of worry and thrill at the same time. I would like to know who my father was affiliated with. There was a glimmer of hesitation in her eyes as she nodded. "I am sure I can look into that. But you should be mindful, Mike. Those dangerous people might not be so keen if they catch you digging places you're not supposed to." She was correct, and there wasn't any turning back now. I had to chase the truth regardless of where it would lead. In the days that followed, Rachel slowly began to fit the jigsaw pieces together. The offshore accounts led to various shell companies with links to organized crime and high-level business dealings. The names that emerged from my father's notebooks were not simple names, but rather a web of powerful and wealthy individuals that operated in the gray areas of the law. The type of information Rachel continued to uncover was increasingly dangerous. She found connections to illegal arms deals, human trafficking, and money laundering. My father had been associated with an unimaginable amount of people that engaged in deep world crime, whom I never would have guessed my father to be associated with. But through all of this research, there was one specific name that kept emerging. Victor Hale seemed to be the one at the center of it all. Victor Hale was a name I vaguely recognized, but I had no idea who he was. Rachel claimed he was well known in the underworld, a businessman who had legitimate dealings but ran a criminal empire underneath. If my father was dealing with Hale, it all makes sense. It explains the money that was never accounted for, the concealment, and the panic in my father's letter. Still, it raised a terrifying question. Was my father's death truly a heart failure, or was it something else entirely? The more I reasoned it, the more my father's unexpected death raised suspicion. As far as I knew, my father was healthy, so the real question is, what led him to hide everything? Was he actually trying to protect himself? Had someone figured out that he was planning to leave everything behind? Or worse, had someone deemed him a liability? Rachel had warned me that going further could be dangerous, but I couldn't stop myself. If I'm being honest, I need to know whether my father was murdered. I can't just walk away pretending everything is fine. And if he was, Victor Hale needs to be brought down and fast, or he will figure out that I'm onto him. But with every single step I took, I felt my father's warning get heavier. Once you pull on those strings, there's no going back. The further Rachel got into Victor Hale, the more I felt anxious. This had moved beyond the scope of finances. There was something malignant lurking behind my father's treasure chest of wealth, and with each day that passed, his death seemed less and less like a simple heart attack. Hale was a frightening person, one who would not think twice before getting rid of anyone who posed a threat. As we progressed, I started noticing that I may have already caught his attention without my knowledge. Rachel and I met again a week after her initial findings. She looked more serious than I had ever seen her, clutching a folder full of documents while sitting across from me in a dimly lit cafe. "Mike, You must listen to me, she said, her tone low but intense. I traced the money and everything leads back to Hale. Your father's accounts were routing money through Hale's shell companies for years. And if I'm correct, your father was trying to get out, which is why he tried to hide everything. He was trying to sever connections. An icy chill broke out on my forehead. So you mean to say he was murdered? Rachel nodded, her eyes clouded with concern. It's a possibility. Gee, there's no concrete proof yet, but from everything I've found, it looks like your father was trying to distance himself from Hale's operations. He may have been planning to take the money and disappear. But once you're involved with someone like Hale, you don't just walk away. The room began spinning as her words sank on me. My father did not die from ailment. He had been murdered. And now, I was uncovering the very secret he had tried so hard to conceal. What do we do now? My voice was trembling out of rage and fear. What if Hale realizes that I'm looking into this? We have to stop, Rachel said, interrupting my heavy thoughts. My voice was too steady. Rachel, for all of his other side shows, people tend to get on the wrong side of Hale and lose their lives. I'm talking about missing persons cases. I'm talking about accidents. Mike, if you go further, you could end up like your father. However, stopping was not an option. I had uncovered hidden skeletons that I didn't want to touch. My father passed away in suspicious circumstances, and the truth is, I've become obsessed with finding out what actually happened. Everything that Hale took away from me, it set fire to the anger that had been festering inside me. My sense of security, my father, and my peace of mind. I can't walk away. Not now. Not ever. My world was on fire. Days after while my world was single, I came back home to receive a warning, deafening anonymous letter. It was a single sheet of coffee-stained paper with a warning typed on it. It was haunting and simply dreadful. Stop searching for your father's affairs. Walk away and heed my warning if you know what is good for you. I was paralyzed with fear, and every bone in my body was telling me to run. The threat alone hindered me from moving even an inch. Not only was I being stalked, but every single thing I did was being monitored by someone. A good part of me started to contemplate whether Rachel's advice on packing my belongings and running away was the solution. Sadly, that tactic would only leave my father's killer to walk away in glee, which was honestly baffling. I could not abandon this situation. Fleeing from this was not an option. I was jotting down clues the entire day in order to figure out where I could find Hale. What I did learn was what I would be calling extremely reckless. I understood where Hale operated, a highly esteemed private club located in the city. That was the last place I would consider looking for him. But his whereabouts would explain why powerful figures are able to get all their dirty work done without being caught near this place. With this information, I now had the answers, but none of my burning questions were being answered. I had no strategy made beforehand, which should have been the plan. Regardless, my fingers were crossed, hoping all the pieces managed to fall into place once I reached the club. All that was certain was that Hale had the blood of my father on his hands, and he had to pay. My thoughts were right when picturing this place's colossal nature. As I step inside the setup, fancy glimmering chandeliers, marbled floors, and expensive suits roaming all over the room immediately grabbed my attention. I began to walk towards the back, where Hale leads with his associates, my hands trembling out of a mix of fear and determination. As I quivered through, split focus was now directed towards the corner table. As my eyes shifted, I viewed Victor Hale, who was sitting at a corner table with his back against the room. A group of men surrounded him while he took gulps of his whiskey. He looked just as I imagined, tall and imposing while maintaining a cold, calculating demeanor. Dominance defined control. I hesitated for a moment, second thinking whether am I about to commit the biggest blunder of my life. But after a while, anger took the chain and I steered straight towards him. Heard Hale come out of my mouth a tad louder than how I wanted it to be. Instantly heads began to turn and all the men around him stiffened. Hale was devoid of any initial reaction but instead refreshed his drink with nip while effortlessly rotating towards me. The moment his stare switched to my eyes, I could tell he recognized me. Am I that obvious? Feeling uncomfortable, I heard him mutter, "I was wondering when you'd show up," in an unbothered voice. I felt like my heart was racing, but I was able to rein myself in. "You murdered my father." Hale raised an eyebrow at me, the corner of his mouth slightly curled. "And I suppose you are here as some sort of grievance? Your father made his own choices, Michael. I didn't force him to do anything he didn't want to do." I unclenched my fists. The truth was, me saying that is making me furious. You ordered his death. He wanted to leave, and you tried your best to make his life miserable. Hale sighed before reclining in his chair once again. Your father was a good man, but he was in too deep, and once you're in, there's no getting out. He knew that. He made his bed, and unfortunately, he had to lie in it. My vision went blurry, solely based off of the rage I was feeling. "You will not get away with this," I practically scoffed. "I have no reason to be scared of you." Hale let out a chuckle that sounded low and menacing. "Is that so? You should be. You have no idea how deep this goes, Michael. You have just started, and if you continue, you are going to end up just like him." My hands were shaking, so I decided to take a step closer. Are you attempting to intimidate me? I will not stop until you pay dearly for what you've done. For the first time, Hale has lost his arrogance of facing his smile. Just remember, this is your last warning, Hale says as he starts looking at Michael intensely. As I drove to home, the burden of his warning rested heavy on my chest. The battle was not over, not even close. I had obstacles too great to overcome, but the challenge also gave me motivation to succeed. Looking Victor Hale in the eyes and not backing down gave me hope. A few days later, I got an envelope in the mail hoping it did not contain a threat. The details were concerning, but I'd never been so afraid of genuinely wanted to take Hale down. Rachel and I spent the next week putting together everything we needed to bring him down. It was dangerous, and we knew Hale had eyes everywhere. We were prepared to do this and expose him for the truth that he truly is. The media picked it up a month later with the headline, "Business Tycoon Victor Hale Unmasked in Huge Criminal Scandal." There was no way to retrieve the situation. The fallout was severe. Everything crumbled around him. Hale's empire fell apart. All of his empire turned against him, and he was apprehended within days of the article's release. I did it. I was able to take down the very man that put my father 6 feet under, the man that controlled our lives from behind the curtains. While standing outside the courthouse and watching Hale being escorted away in handcuffs, I wasn't filled with the sense of victory I wanted to feel. I did not feel like I won anything. Yes, the truth is out, but the price was quagmire. All the weight of his secret changed me and my father, while he was still gone. Ultimately, I had discovered the hidden treasure he desperately didn't want me getting my hands on. This wasn't only about the money. This was a deeply rooted legacy of deception, scams, and ruthless violence. And now, the cost was mine to pay.